everybody? Garrett back here, and I want to talk to you guys today about Friday the 13th, or Jason Voorhees, when he jumped from Paramount to New Line Cinema. Now again, I'm not going to get into the whole backstory. This happened in the early 90s. But what I want to do is I want to talk about my history, my memories around that time. I was a little kid, but I want to specifically talk about things like Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X, because I do have some cool stories about those movies, and it just happens to be a good time to talk about these stories because I just got the brand new releases of Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X from Arrow Video here on 4K. Look at how beautiful this artwork is. I'll get into these as the story goes on, but I want to kind of bring it back to the first time I'd ever seen these movies. My thoughts exactly, I'll run through my history with them, but I think it's going to be a fun story, and I want you guys to kind of tell me in the comment section below your story when it came to these specific movies. So again, in the early 90s, we're going to do something different with the Friday the 13th franchise, with Jason especially. They want to kind of get him matched up with Freddy Krueger. A whole bunch of stuff went down. But I can remember as a little kid, Friday the 13th was always a horror movie that was one of my favorites, and it was kind of a gateway for me. It was one of those franchises that always had lore. When you see a guy in a hockey mask, I mean, as a kid, you're asking questions. Who is this guy that's got a machete and a hockey mask? Sometimes you saw fake Jasons with a hockey mask and a chainsaw, but to you, it was always Jason. I had a game that was called Splatterhouse for I think it was Genesis or something as a little kid, and to me, that was Jason, right? That was Jason to me. Because again, that hockey mask was so iconic in the world of horror throughout the 80s. So bringing it back again, my uncle really tried to get me into horror movies, or teased me with horror movies at a very young age. So much so that every time he put on something and he's like, check this out, my father would come in the room and be like, don't show him this. Because at that point, I was really young, like 5 years old or something like that. So I can remember him showing me Friday the 13th Part 3. Very early on, and he was explaining to me how cool it was. It was 3D, and he was kind of explaining what 3D meant to me at the time. And I can remember being at my grandmother's house and him breaking out Friday the 13th Part 3 and showing me some of the 3D effects, like the yo-yo and stuff like that. And I can remember my father coming in and being like, take this off. Similar story with Texas Chainsaw that I can get into at another time. But from then on, I was always very intrigued by the Friday the 13th series because he built up something like Part 3 so much in my head. And I can even remember him getting to the point where you saw Jason at the end looking out the window and he was all deformed. And I can remember having nightmares about that because it was like I had never seen anybody who kind of looked like that before. And the next big thing I remember was when Jason Takes Manhattan. That was everywhere. It was all over commercials. I saw the commercials so much, Jason Takes Manhattan. And, you know, I was always very intrigued. But at that point, I was such a young kid. There was no way in hell I was going to be able to see that movie. But I just always remember the commercials. So again, fast forward again to the early 90s. And we had New Line putting out their first Friday the 13th movie, which was technically Part 9, but they called it Jason Goes to Hell. Now, I can remember the first time I'd ever heard about this movie. I was in the theater. I was seeing, I don't know, it was 93. I could have been seeing anything. There was so many movies in 93 I remember going to the theater for with my parents. But what I do remember seeing is some kind of, it was either a poster or a standee of the image, of that main image, of the fire and the chrome mask and that thing coming out of the eye. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh my God, what is this? This is that Jason, and look at that mask, it's chrome, like I've never seen that before, that's so awesome. Like I remember being so hyped for it. But still being a kid, I was probably like 12 at the time, maybe even 11 when I saw that poster. And I can remember my parents being like, absolutely not, you know, you're not seeing that movie. And it always just had this kind of lore about it, like it was like forbidden. Nobody ever let me see Friday the 13th movies. But I remember being so intrigued by that image that I saw. So now a couple of years later, I was probably a preteen at this point. This was probably 1994. And I can remember Friday the 13th coming on television. And it was like marathon. It must have been around Halloween. It might have been 93 or 90, probably 93, Halloween of 93. It was on TV. It kind of came on in October after wrestling or something. And I remember it saying, you know, Friday the 13th marathon. And I think it went from part 1 to maybe 8 or something like that. And I can remember watching that on a Saturday. I watched part 1 for the first time, and I absolutely loved it. Watched part 2, watched part 3, which I was super excited for because that technically was the first Friday the 13th I'd ever seen bits and pieces with my uncle back in the day. So I remember at that point, I think it was getting later in the afternoon, and my mom was like, go outside or something like that. And I remember going outside and hanging out with some friends and other kids being like, what were you doing? I was like, oh, the Friday the 13th marathon's on. They're like, oh, come to my house and we'll watch it. And I remember going to this kid Chris's house down the street. We all went in and were eating snacks and watching more of the Friday the 13th movies at his house during that marathon. But I can remember going home and just being like, oh man, like I want to watch more of these movies. Well, my friend Mark and I had a sleepover at his house in like 1994, and we made it a point. It was myself, and I'm going to actually throw a name out here, which is super wild right now. So it was him, and if you guys follow Major League Baseball, you might have remembered a player named Rocco Baldelli. I think he was Rookie of the Year or something, but he retired kind of early due to injuries and stuff. Well, he was one of the people that I was with at that time. It was myself, him, my friend Mark. We went to Blockbuster Video and we rented every single Friday the 13th movie. I will say his dad rented us every Friday the 13th movie, and we made it a point to stay up all night and watch every one of these movies. But we didn't want to just watch these movies. We wanted to take notes on these movies. We had a notepad. We had every one, part 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we had categories like kills, you know, how many females, how many males, coolest kill, you know, Jason's look, or whatever. We had categories for each movie, and we would check them off as we went. And I can remember we were like, yeah, you're going to do part 1, hold the book, and we're going to tally all this up as it goes. Let's see who can kind of make it through the night. It was wild. It was one of the coolest experiences as a kid, is to be like, you know what, we're going to rent all these movies, and we're just going to stay up all night long and just pound through 1 through 9. And it was really the first time I had seen these movies kind of not on television, so I got to see a lot of the kills and gore that I'd never seen before as a young preteen at the time. And I can remember us staying up late. We were in his living room, his parents were sleeping, we were taking notes, and we were loving it. We had snacks. It was pure, like, early 90s, growing up as a kid, pre-internet, pre-phones, stuff like that. Internet had kind of just came out with America Online around that time, but this was just kids having fun, being crazy. And the morning hit, and his parents came downstairs to have breakfast, and we were half asleep, you know, trying to watch these movies still. And the way their house was set up was like, the TV was facing us, and we were all on the couch, and there was people on the floor in sleeping bags. And then over the TV, you could see the kitchen. So behind the TV was the kitchen, and then kind of off to the side behind the TV was their table. And I can remember his parents, like, eating breakfast right there. And, you know, they were kind of cool. Like, they wouldn't bother us about stuff like that. But, you know, we're half asleep. We're kind of watching these things. Jason Goes to Hell comes on, and we press play, and we're just watching it along, da-da-da-da. And it gets to that scene in the tent with the couple. And I can remember me and all the other kids that were there were like, because his parents were literally like right there, and we're like, oh my God, if they see us watching this right now, like, they're gonna be pissed and they're gonna call this whole thing off, even though we have only one more movie to watch. So I can remember us like pausing it and like waiting, which felt like hours, for them to finally finish their breakfast and go upstairs. I think at that time we had gone and got breakfast, ate, and just to buy time till we could kind of see the rest of this movie. So I thought that was just a fun story when it came to my first time seeing Jason Goes to Hell was during that marathon that we had as young kids. And that scene is always stuck in my head because I can remember being like so nervous that we were watching that scene at like, I don't know, we were probably 12 or 13 years old at the time, as his parents were literally like right there eating. And it stuck with me. And Jason Goes to Hell was a weird movie. It really was. Like, I'm a huge fan of Friday the 13th. When it started to veer off into kind of taking chances with New Line and what they were doing with the character, I didn't like it as much. I liked the camp setting. I liked all of that basic slasher body count. Like, I was more into the aesthetics of part 1 through 8 and less about what happened here on New Line. But I do appreciate what they were going for and changing it up and completely changing it up. And I actually find I like it more now as an adult, and I appreciate more now than I did as a kid who was such a fan of just that camp slasher aspect of it. But what this movie did do was when that ending scene hit and none of us knew what was coming, we were all mind blown at the end of Jason Goes to Hell when his mask is there and it's over and you see Freddy's glove come up and grab that mask and pull it down. We all sat there with our jaws dropped because we knew at that time, oh my God, this is next. This is coming next. Freddy versus Jason, they're going to be in the same movie. This is going to be insane. Us being huge wrestling fans, this was like a huge mark out moment for us. This was WrestleMania when it comes to horror movies, and we were all in. And as you know, we would have to wait a long ass time for that. I mean, geez, that was something that we were like, oh my God, I can't wait. And we waited and waited and waited nearly 10 years till the next Friday the 13th movie came out. And it was not Freddy vs. Jason, which was a huge bummer. And in a similar situation, the first time I even heard about this movie, I was in the theater watching something else, and I saw a huge cardboard standee of The Image again. The poster of Jason X. Now, Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell, regardless of what you think of the movies, some of the most iconic, coolest, raddest posters ever. And I think when it comes to Friday the 13th, I don't care what anybody says. That franchise front to back has some of the coolest artwork, coolest movie posters ever. I will say, I also think Elm Street has a really, really cool set of posters. But yeah, those two franchises' posters really sold those movies. Such iconic pieces, which I'm happy to own quite a few in my collection, especially things like Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. I do have those one-sheets, and I display them proudly because they are awesome looking posters. So when I saw that image of Jason with the knife and the girl screaming, and it was a real cool looking knife, and you had half his face with the hockey mask, half his face some kind of futuristic looking thing, very 2000s, a very Jason X, right? Like everything back then was either X or Z or something like that to be a little edgy. I was all about it. Now again, at that point I was about 20 years old when Jason X came out, so I didn't really know a lot about what this was going to be about. I didn't know this was going to be Jason in space. I didn't know a lot of that. I knew this was going to be something cool, and we were finally getting Jason back on the big screen. Now, what makes Jason X so cool is it was actually the first Jason movie I'd ever seen in theaters, which unfortunately at that point, there's only been 3 Jason movies I've seen in the theaters. So going to the theater to finally see a Friday the 13th movie on the big screen, I was stoked. We were there Thursday night, midnight, before that thing debuted on Friday. We were in the first showing. Place was going bananas. And I remember sitting there being like, oh my God, this is gonna be dope. I don't know why we're not doing Freddy, but this is gonna be cool. Maybe Freddy makes an appearance. I didn't know what was going on here. I know Jason X did have leaks online. I never saw those leaks. So therefore I was going in pretty blind besides what I saw on the trailer. So I remember going into it and being pretty disappointed with it. I didn't like the space aspect of it. Felt very sci-fi movie. There was a couple decent kills in this. I remember leaving Jason X very, very disappointed. I can still remember, I've talked about this on a stream before, that scene at the end where he's outside the ship flying through space and that guy's kind of on his back. And I remember my friend Keith stood up and he's like, what the heck is this? And he was so mad at what we were seeing, that this guy was riding on Jason's back at the end. And I remember him being so bullshit. And when this movie ended, I remember I was just being pretty deflated and being like, oh, that's what we got all those years later. There was some cool scenes at the campground, you know, that they did in this, but that's about it. So we really were not fans of this whole Jason X thing. So fast forward again to physical media releases. I did pick this up on all different formats at the time. Being a collector, being a huge Friday the 13th fan, I needed these in my collection regardless. But after watching Jason X again, I like it a little bit more, but still one of my bottom favorites when it comes to this franchise. I think the coolest thing about it is honestly the poster. Uber Jason, pretty cool, but not really necessary for what I like when it comes to Friday the 13th movies. But again, it has a special place in my heart. First Friday the 13th movie I'd ever seen in theaters. It's one of my favorite all-time franchises. I'm just a huge fan of Jason Voorhees himself. So again, I can appreciate Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X a little bit, just due to them trying to do something a little bit different. So now, these brand new 4Ks came out from Arrow Video. Now I'm going to showcase these to you guys, tell you what's on these, show you what's inside. One of the biggest reasons I did buy these, do I think there's going to be a Friday the 13th box set in 4K? At some point I do. I wasn't necessarily, doing backflips when I saw these things get announced, like other people may have, because I own these movies on so many other formats. It got to a point now where it's like, I don't really need to keep buying these movies unless they kind of win me over in some way with either like some deluxe box set or something like that. But to buy these individually really wasn't on the top of my priority list. But I've talked about this before too. I'm an aesthetic collector. Things that make sense to me, things that go together to me, that kind of wins me over with what I decide to purchase now and what I don't. Now, again, you could say, is that a package collector? I don't know. I mean, again, the movies, they're fine. I love Friday the 13th. They get a pass for me. I'm not going to say I hate these movies. I like Friday the 13th, guys, so they all get a pass for me. Not my favorite of the franchise, but again, when you kind of stack these up against other horror movies and stuff out there, or other movies out there, they're perfectly fine. I've seen these multiple times. To be honest, Jason Goes to Hell is one that I kind of go back to a little more frequently than ever now because it is just so different. So let's dive into this. First one, Jason Goes to Hell. Now, look at the artwork here. That is one of the biggest reasons that I dove on this thing, because I'm a huge art collector, movie posters, art prints, alternate movie posters, and I love artists. I've had Matt Ryan Tobin on my show, talking to him. I love his artwork. Well, Gary Pullen did the artwork for these, who is great. Ghoulish Gary. I have a lot of his prints. I've been following him for years. I like to support when a lot of these artists get their stuff on physical media. I love physical media. I love the artists. I want to support their products, and doing Friday the 13th or Jason type stuff really, really is dope. And he did this one, which I always thought was an amazing image for the remake. He did this for Arrow. Now, what I like about this is that he did this, and he did these all in the same vein. Like, as you can see, they really go together here, which is what really won me over on these releases, is that, you can put these together and these kind of work. I really, really do adore that. But let's see what's inside this Jason Goes to Hell release. I will say this is stacked with so many features that you're not getting anywhere else. So if you're a fan of this and you want to know more, definitely dive into this if you want to check out some more features on this. Inside you do get the normal, but of course you're going to flip it and you're going to get the iconic that I was talking about artwork here, which again, seeing this even with the Arrow logo at the bottom, dope. Now, do I wish we got that crow mask? I do. I think that would have been kind of cool at that time in the 90s. But yeah, I love, love, love this image. And we get the 4K of both the rated and unrated cuts of this, which I think is super cool. Now, one big thing is there's a Jason Goes to Hell documentary coming out that is not included in here, which I thought would have been a real cool addition to this, but I guess timing just kind of didn't work out, but it's something I'm really looking forward to. So inside here, you do get the unrated cut and the rated cut, the theatrical cut on 4K. You also get a poster of this iconic artwork from Ghoulish Gary, and you get that mini poster with that artwork, which is really, really cool. And then you flip it and you get the iconic one-sheet poster as well. Inside you do get this. This is awesome. You get a little book, and it's got the autopsy information on Jason from the movie. And then in here it's got some images there, like you see in the movie, and it's got some cool stuff inside. So again, Arrow always does a bang-up job when it comes to, you know, the things that they put in here, and also to the features, and also to the restoration and stuff. But again, Jason Goes to Hell has grown on me through the years, and I can't wait to check this one out again in 4K. All right, so as we dive in to Jason X, again, cool image. I'm still a bigger fan of the original artwork, but cool image nonetheless. Still in that same vein of the Gary Pullen split face design, which I'm a huge fan of, so everything looks really aesthetic. Then you've got this inside with the poster art flip, which I will definitely put this. And I also find it really gnarly and cool to see Jason, this artwork with the little arrow thing at the bottom. I do like that a lot as a physical media fan. And as you can see, loaded. There's nothing else with this movie that's got special features like this. There's a lot of making ofs and stuff. Everything you get on the Scream Factory stuff kind of ports over as well. So inside, same thing. You do get the 4K there. Now I got the posters. You got the Pullen art, that Ghoulish Gary artwork here. And then you get the original one-sheet art there as well. And that mini poster design that Arrow likes to do. And then you get the little booklet here, which is kind of cool. And it's got the Uber Jason images on there, which I think is pretty gnarly as well. And then inside you do get stuff about the flick. So again, talks a little bit about the presentation, talks a little bit about the movie in this little book. So like I said, here's the brand new 4Ks from Arrow Video of Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. And again, I have these in so many editions. So here we go, I'm gonna showcase these as well. I got the VHS of both these flicks, the DVDs of both these flicks, and the Blu-rays of both these flicks. And obviously, if you open this bad boy up, you have them in here as well. So it's not my first rodeo, and that's why I was a little bit concerned about rebuying these. But when I saw Arrow Video doing it, I would love to see what they put on this, the features, the presentation. I think this was just a win, even though, like I said, I'm really focusing on not upgrading everything. But Friday the 13th being my all-time favorite franchise, these all going together like this, I had to keep this collection going. Huge fan of Gary Pullen, huge fan of Arrow Video. I knew I needed these in my collection. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed the showcase. Let me know your thoughts on these two movies. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X. What are your memories on those? Because if you're around my age, Jason X or Jason Goes to Hell is probably the first time you'd ever seen a Jason movie in theaters. So they do hold special places in my heart based on my memories of these movies. And telling these stories, I'm hoping to bring you back into time and opening up that brain to situations when you saw Friday the 13th for the first time, where you were, what you felt. And again, I had a real cool story with that marathon and seeing these posters for the first time. And man, it just brings me back to really want to watch these again, because it just brings me to a time where it's like kids could be kids back then and do those things where renting VHS really meant something and making a night of it. It was just a really cool experience, which had a lot to do with Jason Goes to Hell. And then my experience as an adult seeing Jason X for the first time. And man, I love Friday the 13th. I love Jason Voorhees. And if you are planning on picking any of these up from Arrow Video, feel free, guys. If you watch my content, use my code RAD. It only works on the Arrow Video site to get a discount at checkout. That code is for you, for my listeners, for my watchers, my supporters. Code RAD on Arrow Video site to get a little discount if you decide to pick those things up. So gang, thank you for checking this out. This is Garrett at Born to be Rad. And until next time, stay